My superpower was always my ability to sit down with someone and engender their trust and get them to understand that I really am just after their story. The reason Kevin wanted to do it with me was that our chemistry off camera was better than talking about wrestling on camera. And as far as ending the streak, a mid-card guy couldn't do it. There had to be a top name. So it had to be Nash or one of those guys. Do it, we'll do it differently. We're gonna light it, we're gonna mic it, it's gonna look good, it's gonna sound good. It got to the point where our shows, he called me one day. I'm just asking, is there any way you could put me on some kind of retainer? We worked really hard, took it really seriously, grew it as a business, took it seriously as a business. I don't know that I would have changed anything.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.
My guest today is an innovator in the shoot interview space. I've heard him called the king of shoot interviews. You, of course, know him from Kayfabe Commentaries. You can now find him as the co-host of Kliq This alongside Kevin Nash. I know he's probably sick of hearing this with how many podcasts there are now, but he is an inspiration to us all. Please welcome Sean Oliver.
Now you have to leave that little flub in the beginning in for the realism of the program.
Yes.
That's something we talk about on Nash on the Nash podcast all the time. That like fuck ups you leave in. When we get mad at each other, you leave it in. It's
Gives them a little window into who you really are, right? The viewer.
Isn't that what podcasting was supposed to be? Like every man's programming, like warts and all, nobody too perfect. We're all sitting here, naked from the waist down anyway. So
you got me. Yeah. It is awesome to have you here, though. And like I mentioned, Kliq This. So episode 101 recently dropped. So you're over 100 on Kliq This. How did you feel about that?
Well, we did some fun stuff for episode 1. I asked Kevin, I brought it up, I don't know, like when we were at like 95 or 96, I was like, we're coming up to 100. So I think people might expect something, of a celebratory nature. And he said, dude, you're asking the guy who doesn't even celebrate his birthday. I said, all right, we'll just do a show then. And I did bring up some funny statistics, like I wanted to. I actually sent poor Steve Kaufman, our producer, to actually find out in his transcripts through search functions how many F-bombs we dropped in total in 100 episodes.
Yeah.
All the curses, give me the numbers, what are we at? And I wanted to see if Kevin could guess like these things and like how many shows, we're up some TV shows, how many TV shows that you know and love never made it to where we are at 100 episodes.
Exactly.
Like The Sopranos and all these other shows. But you're probably wondering about the F-bomb question.
I am, yeah.
I want to get the exact number. I texted it to X-Pac to see. I know he's a regular listener, so I wanted to see if he could guess. Let's see.
The anticipation. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, let me get your guess. If you're a listener, maybe you can.
Let's say I'm gonna go with 100 episodes, maybe like I'll say 10 an episode, 7 to 10 an episode. I'm gonna say somewhere around 700 even.
Okay. The answer is 22,437.
I gave you guys a big benefit of the doubt there. That's
yeah,
a lot. That is definitely a lot. That's that transition word at this point for you guys, I feel.
If any, lest any of you thought we weren't absolute degenerates, allow that number to serve as evidence of the contrary.
And, I feel like it's very well documented with Kayfabe Commentaries. You've talked about it. You really like to produce a quality product, and you always have. So after 100 episodes, what do you do to keep it interesting?
Well, because it's a weekly show and we've never missed a week.
Yeah.
Including the week his son passed away last year. that kind of set a tone and a contract that the show would be real and not I don't want to say I don't want to give a negative impression of something well produced. It has to be well produced. You know, you don't want shoddy production, but in
Right.
as much as overly prepared podcasts, where after 20 minutes or so, you know that you're listening to somebody poring over notes and reading research. And God, who wants to be talked to like that for an hour? God forbid, two. Uh, so it had to be conversational. And that was something that was very much up front. When Kevin first approached me about this about 6 years ago, I said, what's the pitch? You know, what's your take on this? What is this going to be? It can't be, you know, we got to definitely have a differentiating um theme or something. And he said, two guys at a bar.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that was kind of the guiding principle. And it turned out to be so authentic in that way that all of our listeners, we have a very loyal base because they're like at the bar with us. You know, we have a subscription channel, Kliq This TV, where if you know when you sign up, if you join, you can come to the tapings live every week and sit in the pre-show meetings and us just warming up and being irreverent and they participate. They send their comments and questions and stuff. So yeah, a bunch of friends at a bar.
So you're
That was
still
the
making innovations though, even in something like podcasting that, like you said, there's so many. I feel like I don't know many shows that let you sit down on the tapings, the live tapings like that. I
yeah
streams, but taping seems unique. Yeah.
yeah because we at first we were doing like watch along type things and everybody else does them. So and generally my gag reflex starts to kick in if I'm doing anything that too many other people are doing because why mine, right? Why ours?
Yeah.
That's why with kayfabe commentary such an emphasis was put on looking different, sounding different, emphasis on production and really intensely researched and written product so that it felt a lot more like a TV show um, than what most of the shoot interviews were. Formatting, etc. So I guess that's part of the magic here with this. There's not a real big concerted effort to study the market and do what we do. It just kind of came natural to us. The reason Kevin wanted to do it with me was not just because our programming on kayfabe commentaries was also always very popular and the public was always commenting you guys need to have a podcast. You have to have a podcast. Good chemistry, good chemistry. But what Kevin knew, and I knew, was that our chemistry off camera was better than we were talking about wrestling on camera and just like fucking around, make each other laugh. Just we go to dinner with the crew after a kayfabe commentary shoot, or I'd run into Kev at an event or whatever. And it was those moments I think that convinced him that if we put that on the air, everybody would enjoy it.
Yeah.
And making them a part of it by bringing them in to the Kliq This TV club, the 11 Soft Club, as it were, um, just adds to it.
Yeah, and I think it shows through. You mentioned a loyal fan base. So you and Kevin had that chemistry like you're talking about, and it was really in person, I think, that helped with that. So what was going through your mind when everything shifted to more of a virtual format for you and Kevin?
I don't like this format at all. I mean, and I could never do kayfabe commentary stuff this way because I think part of what made our programming intriguing and successful was a chemistry.
Right.
And that's something you have to engender in person when someone's sitting 2 feet from you. And getting a sense of you and feeding off of your energy. Um, that's where the bond is formed. Doing it on a computer is horrible. And I talked on the air. I had a solo podcast just to wet my feet. I wanted to learn the market and how it all worked and the process and everything before I did anything big scale. So I had um a solo podcast called Kayfabe Stories You're Not Supposed to Hear. Uh and I had guests from all walks on there. I had wrestlers on there.
Mhm.
I had Ron Jeremy, the porno star, on there. I had yeah, I had an FBI agent on. I just
That's cool.
people who
That's yeah.
yeah, people who had stories you might not hear about in traditional circles. That was
Right.
the hook. But it was really putting myself through school, through podcast school and how that all worked. And I remember saying, I think to Raven, he was on one week. I said, he was podcasting before me. I said, how do you establish any bond with somebody staring at a computer screen? I hate this. My superpower was always my ability to sit down with someone and engender their trust after a few minutes and get them to understand that I really am just after their story. I don't want to make them look bad. I'm not trying to get them to tell stories that are going to get them in trouble. I just want their story because everybody has one, and
Yeah.
it's in each individual's way fascinating. So that disappears when we do things this way. So, it's tough.
No, definitely. I definitely agree with you. I think it was obviously a big detractor of COVID. One of the biggest was that social interaction. Um, I think you've done one in-person Kliq This so far. Are there plans for another one?
Yeah, 100%. If here's the here's the truth of it. We will certainly do live Kliq This is, but Kevin is such a big draw as a signing, as an autograph
Right.
guest. They're always producing new like Funkos and action figures of him and stuff, and the collectors uh really want him in that capacity. So when someone brings Kev out, it behooves the promoter to get Kev signing at a table.
Yeah.
And Kevin is not cheap, because his stuff still markets very well for anyone who gets their stuff signed. So how do we sell someone on putting us in a theater somewhere or on a stage somewhere in a venue to do a live show for an hour and a half when that hour and a half could have been selling fans tickets to
Exactly.
get stuff signed? So if Kevin was a lesser name, you'd see less of a draw in the autograph market. You'd have seen more live shows, I bet.
Well, it'd be cool to look forward to one in the future. Maybe just a Kliq This alone type of event, or branching off something without Kevin signing. Um, who knows? But on the topic of Kevin Nash, so Who Killed WCW out right now? I enjoyed the first two episodes. What did you think of them?
I watched, oh God, did I watch both? God, I can't remember. I watched the first one. And then no, yeah, I did. I watched the second one. I'm getting confused. Today's Monday, right? This one hasn't come out yet, right?
Oh yeah, there's a third one about to come out. Yeah.
Right, about to come out this week. So yes, I've seen everything that's out so far. And well done. I knew it was coming. I talked to Evan, the producer of it. I'm the Nash whisperer. They come to me when they want Kevin for stuff. So I had to sell Kevin on this project, and again, like this one's going to be different. This is really, I got to talk about this again. No, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. It's the Rock's company. They're going to handle it differently. Well, what I like about, all right. So dual track here.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they are spending time on the programming and business end of it with Brad Siegel, etc.,
Right.
about the TV network and how much of a role that was playing. Fans tend to go for the low-hanging fruit when we talk about what went wrong in WCW and begin to blame talent and creative, right? Because that's what they've been reading in the dirt sheets, and that that's what the books were written about. But to go inside Turner Broadcast, well, actually, to go inside AOL Time Warner and their broadcasting division, and the change over from when it was TBS, TNT, now all these other corporate entities involved, studying that is where the heart of the story is. And they're spending time on that, which is very good. Flip side of the coin, still spending, I feel, an inordinate amount of time trying to discern which booking decisions were good and which were bad. And it's like poring over the scripts of a television series that played out. It wasn't a fail. I mean, it died, but it wasn't a failed endeavor. For almost 2 years they were beating WWE, and but it's a business, and so the machinations of the business contributed greatly, I think, to when people blame Kev all the time, like, "Oh, Kev, the finger poke of doom killed." He's like, "Yeah." He said, "Did it kill the Braves too? Because the Atlanta Braves got sold out from under Turner. Killed them too? Finger poke out on the pitcher's mound?
Killed everything. The finger poke of death.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what you said there. One of the most interesting scenes to me, I think it was in the second episode, was when they showed the boardroom, I think it was, for a lot of the networks, and they asked if they were embarrassed that they were having wrestling on. They were like, "We're not embarrassed at all. Look what it's doing for us. We see families coming to this 40,000 people." So I agree with you. That part is very interesting.
Yeah. I was glad that they're spending time focusing on that.
Yeah. I heard you just mentioned, so I heard you ask Nash who he thinks, killed WCW. Loaded question, obviously, tongue in cheek, but do you care to expand on what you just said? Do you have any thoughts on what you think might have led to WCW's demise, or as a fan back
The
then?
person who had the best commentary on it, I think it was Eric, who said it was death by 1,000 cuts. And it really was. There was so many things contribute, and it bled out. It bled out quickly. And something that I found so interesting about the behind the scenes, again, the business end, the programming end, that you don't hear about that much, was how they were taking the WCW profits, the network, when I say they, were taking that to keep other programming on TNT alive that wasn't doing well. So it was never the biggest cash cow stays alive, because the money goes into those coffers. The television doesn't work that way, right? So what they were doing was all that ad revenue and all that money that was coming was keeping other programming alive, and it was being moved out of um off the WCW balance sheets, so that again, all that stuff that we don't know about, they could spend so much time on just that part. It's 4 episodes, but you
Right.
could probably spend a lot of time on how television works, on how the networks work, if you wanted to give a little history, so people know what everybody's talking about when they talk about things like that, about ad revenue and how it's distributed, and not enough there under the WCW heading when we're talking about profits. You could probably do 8 episodes, 12 episodes.
Yeah, and I think that would continue to be very different from what we've seen, the way WWE's told it in past documentaries and et cetera. It does feel like a fresh take on it. Another topic discussing it heavily, I thought, was Goldberg's role, at least in the last
Yeah.
episode, was Goldberg. And of course, the streak ending. Again, asking you more as a fan, do you think your co-host Kevin Nash was the right choice to end Goldberg's streak? Do you think anyone else could have? Or do you think it should have ended?
I don't know. Listen, as a fan, I mean, I was watching that product as a fan at the time,
Yeah.
and what made me and my friends pop, I gotta give you our age group for this to make sense, I guess. So we're talking 98, right? 97, 98. So 25,
Okay.
right? About 25 years old. 25, 26. So we're not cheering for anyone anymore. We don't have that wide-eyed childhood excitement when our favorite wrestler wins the belt. We're a little cynical, little past college, just past college. Um, so anything that surprised us, the cynical, world-weary wrestling fans of their mid-20s or 30s, if you surprised us, you got to pop. So I shake my head when I hear people outside of the age group talking about like running down a lot of what Russo did. I know there was some silliness that goes on in the Russo product. Listen, the guy had to write hours and hours of TV. There's no week off. You write for a traditional television show. You're doing now with streamers. You're doing, I don't know, 10 episodes, 12 episodes a year, and that's it. You're doing 52 no break, nonstop on the road travel. So that's the show you're writing with talent that you might have plans for, and they get hurt. It's changing all the time. You have contracts that exist where someone says, "Doesn't work for me, brother. It has to be changed." Um, a Herculean task, truly, Russo had.
Yeah.
But if he could surprise us, got to pass. Yeah, the hand coming out of Mae Young. But finally, pro wrestling gets no sillier than that. There's absolutely no connection to it, to pro wrestling at all. But if I'm sitting there and I do the double take, it succeeded on a level. It's keeping me watching. So, um, as a fan, I wanted to be surprised. I wanted to be shocked. I wanted things to talk about with other people that watch wrestling.
Yeah, I know that's a great answer. It's true. I mean, people still talk about it to this day. And I remember, and I think Nash said on it when he powerbombed Goldberg, he was over.
Oh,
People,
you're right. You brought up Goldberg. I didn't address that. Right. So, as far as ending the streak, I, as a fan, I just would have expected anybody worthy.
yeah,
A mid card guy couldn't do it, and certainly no one underneath that wouldn't make sense. So it had to be a top name. So it had to be Nash or one of those guys.
yeah. No, totally. And I think it was Eric Bischoff who said that too, like stature wise as well, like Kevin Nash, Goldberg. It made sense. It
Right.
did. Another project that you are working on right now is right behind, or you finished working on, is Tod Gordon's book. So you wrote that. Tod Gordon authorized the story. Tod Is God. People should definitely go check out that book. I'm a big ECW fan, but I feel like I haven't even heard half the stories that are in that book. If you were going to sell someone that book, do you have a favorite story or a few on what we could expect?
God, I mean, not even from a salesman pitch. I have favorite stories just when I was writing it that he would tell me. Um, the Sandman at the Travel Lodge story to illustrate the level of commitment to debauchery that some of these guys were. And I know you say ECW and sex, drugs, and rock and roll comes up. It did a lot for wrestling, and I would hope there's as much emphasis in the book about what it did for smart fans. Like I was, like we're talking about at that time, right? Mid
Yeah,
90s, and I guess in college when ECW was on, and they started speaking to us again. We'd outgrown Hogan, on the other channel, they were still pushing, the hockey player and the clown and the tugboat and so we're in college. Grunge music is here now. Uh, that's done. So when this other product spoke to us and they did smart things, um, they booked for the smart fan, and it was somewhat believable. Listen, much easier for me to believe New Jack might be killing that guy right now than it is that anyone named Typhoon was going to
right.
do any damage in the ring. So So, but with that and ECW comes the tales of the individuals that participated in the Federation and what they did off camera, in the hotel rooms and on the road. And so the Travel Lodge, or the Loser Lodge, as Tod took to calling it, was the hotel near the Philadelphia airport. Circular layout to the place, but it was the home base for the ECW shows every month. And the talent would go back there and the party would ensue. And on one such occasion, in a full hotel room, Hack says all of a sudden, "Is this room 725?" And they're like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh my God." And he runs to the corner and begins to pull up the carpet. At which point Todd's like, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing? I got to pay for this room. You're going to destroy the room." He's like, "No, no, wait." And he pulls out a bag of blow. And everyone's like, "What?" He's like, he goes, "I put it in here." He was boarding a plane
He stashed it.
months ago and couldn't get it on the plane. He didn't know what to do. So he hid it under the carpet in room 725. So then he goes, "Wait a minute, Scorp." And he calls Scorpio out into the hallway where they move a huge potted plant next to the elevator. He goes, "Oh my God." And there's another one under there. He was like the Easter bunny of cocaine. He had hid coke all over the Travel Lodge and forgotten. It had been months. And but that 720 room 725 triggered the that there were gifts, Easter eggs throughout the hotel.
That's hilarious. First of all, crazy. I wonder if he hadn't heard 725, he could have remembered where he even put that
I
for.
I would imagine he'd be 92 on his deathbed, pushing himself out of bed like "Mr. Fullington, where are you going?" "Travelodge 25."
That's
Because Hack's living to 92.
yeah, that's assuming
My
that.
prediction.
I've only experienced two Sandman entrances in my time as a fan. Both, I think, were actually at the WrestleCon Super Show that they do during WrestleMania week. And this past one, I was able to be in the crowd when he came out at the 2300 arena. So that was cool. Also, this time there, but insane.
Yeah. Another good one was I don't even know if I put this, I think I put this in the book. No, I put it in my book, I think, when I ran into New Jack at a signing or whatever, and he was coming in and he passed me and I was like, I don't know, joking around. I was like, "Oh, here comes trouble." And he was just like the 1,000-mile stare, like didn't even see me, walked right by me. I was like, "Oh, okay, something's up, or he's in a bad way tonight or whatever." Sat next to us. His table was next to us, setting up before the event. Oh, we were vending at a live show, the Kayfabe Commentaries table.
Okay.
And so I look over and he's there, and I couldn't remember if I'd given him a copy of the last show he did with us. So I pulled one off the table and I went over to him. I said, "Jack, I don't think I gave you this after we were done." He takes the disc like this. Maybe he was zonked on something. And he
Right.
goes down and slowly puts it in his bag, goes back to the table, staring straight out. Nobody's in front of his table. He's staring straight out. I'm like, "Oh, brother." So they open the doors. Fans are coming in, getting stuff signed. We're selling discs and whatnot. And in a lull in the action, I hear from my right, it's about, I don't know, whatever, an hour after all the fans are in, "Yo, Sean." Turn over. It's Jack. He goes, "You don't say hi?" "Hi, Jack."
That's awesome. New Jack I was lucky enough before, sadly, his passing, to have him on this show in 2020. I think he was still getting used to the whole Zoom thing also. And he was really cool. And usually the concept of the show is like to have a rising star on with a veteran. So I had him on with 911's son, actually. And I had mentioned it probably to him in the email, but I doubt I was emailing New Jack, probably his wife. And about 30 minutes into it, into the interview, he's like, "Wait a minute, you're 911's son." Like his demeanor totally changed. It took about 30 minutes, but it changed, and he gave awesome advice. Really nice guy. Really
Yeah.
through Zoom.
I know that Jack was a headache for a lot of people, a lot of promoters,
Yeah.
and workers that were in the ring with him. But I never had a problem with New Jack. I anytime he worked for me, he was clean, as far as I knew. Funny, uh, just like was down with production, never late, was always there when I needed him.
Yeah.
I I was okay with Jack, and but really shocked to hear. Well, how shocked are we, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he it was shocking because he was young, but there's a section in the book where I go through the wrestlers that passed through ECW that are dead,
Yeah.
and Todd gives his thoughts and whatnot on each of them, and it's not a small chapter, unfortunately.
To transition to another book that you are working on, X-Pac's autobiography. I'm not sure if that's almost done or complete or where you are on that, but is that book, would you say, very different from the Tod Gordon ECW book?
Yeah, in that his story is different, and there's Sean's story is so fascinating, and it really transcends wrestling. We working hard and heavy on it, and a bunch of wrestling books dropped, and I guess I'm partially to blame for this with this one, but a lot of wrestling books came out last year,
Yeah.
and so the publishers kind of put the brakes on their wrestling purchases. There was this. Becky Lynch's book came out recently. Titus had two books out. Tyrus, excuse me, had two books out. Alundra Blaze, Medusa, her book came out. Tod Is God came out. There was a ton, and with big publishers too. So they were all like, "Ooh, market's a little saturated." So Sean and I were like, "All right, let's wait." Our agent said, it's just kind of the market right now. But I mean, we talked to editors about it, and everybody that saw any of it in the publishing industry loved what we had and loved the story. It's a story of a boy with a dream. There's that element of the Rocky element of it, but it's also a story of overcoming personal demons and the challenges therein throughout his childhood, and that he fought into his fame and success in wrestling. It's a heroic story. It's one I can't wait for it to be released because, dude, it is so different
Yeah.
than all the other wrestling books out there. But what does the publishing industry know about wrestling? They see it's a wrestler, oh, Hall of Fame wrestler, oh, another wrestling book, oh, I don't know about that. But it's just so different. And I mean, it will see the light of day. There's absolutely no question that his book
Right.
will be out. Um, but yeah, I mean, I probably 80% done with the first draft when we
Oh, cool.
paused our work. Um, but yeah, it will come. It will come.
I'm very excited for that book, the way you just described it, but also Xbox story. It's very known. Yeah, it's different type of journey and a lot of tragedy, but
Yeah.
glad to see he's in a much better spot now. So it's
Oh,
gonna be cool to
100%.
see that
Yeah.
trajectory. And Sean, your journey into wrestling always surprised me because I heard that you were working on Wall Street first. And anytime that I'm born and raised in New York City, so anytime that I hear Wall Street and I try to describe wrestling as someone of the Wall Street variety, it's not really met with kind words back. So I'm curious how your coworkers felt at the time when you did leave to go pursue interviewing wrestlers.
Even worse than that was the entertainment industry, which I was in since my late teens. So trying to explain wrestling to so I'd be working on a film, and someone would say, "Hey, I hear you on a production company."
Yeah.
Kayfabe Commentaries it's talking about. So I say yes. So there's two hurdles before I get to the word wrestling. Always, it was always, yes, yes, I do. What kind of stuff do you do? Sports-based programming with professional athletes.
That's good. That's good.
If they can't leave well enough alone, it's wrestling. Okay, you either get it or you don't. They're professional wrestlers. and they're interesting people more so than any other sport, and that's why we do this. And yeah, so that was always tricky. There was not a lot of overlap in the worlds. Occasionally I'd be working with someone like my age, and like as a kid they'd be like, oh my God, used to go to the LA Sports Arena when I was a kid and watch WWF. Talk to those guys. Yes, I do. But usually they just they didn't understand it.
Yeah. Which
Now, I was
is
on the periphery of finance on Wall Street. I was working more on the creative end, doing presentations
okay.
and pitches. Um, but still, I was I guess people closest to me there knew what I was starting, because I started it up while I was over there, and on such a whim. My business partner Anthony was a friend of mine when I was in college, and we were total wrestling marks, and he introduced me to the sheets. I didn't even know what they were until he showed me the Observer and the Torch when I was in college. And so anyway, we're on the phone one night. There's nothing going on at work. It was like midnight. I'm still in the city, have my feet up, looking out the window over the East River. And he goes, the only thing that's not been done in wrestling, um, I don't know how young you were. When laser discs and DVDs would be released for really famous movies, they'd have the director or star do a commentary track over the whole film. So you could watch the film as it is, but then you could select an alternate track and you're watching the film, but the director's telling you, yeah, we needed a crane shot for this here. And if you notice at the bottom of and like, we love that shit. He
Yeah.
said alternate commentary tracks, but for wrestling matches. I'm like, oh, so who would do them? He goes, the talent. He said, so you put on your iPod and you click a file and you put on Hogan versus the Sheik when he wins the title, and the Sheik is talking you through everything. It's like sitting on the couch with the wrestler and watching the match. You watch all the historical wrestling matches again, but with talent sitting with you. I said, wow. I said, listen, this is crazy. I said, but can you get me the technology that now remember, this is like 2007, so we're in a different place. um but you can still buy songs from the MP3 store. I was like, can we do like an MP3 store where a fan can buy it and they get a file, and then we can tell them where to start it in the match, because we couldn't sell the video of the match, obviously we didn't own it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, yeah, sure. And we found the way to do it. I blindly got on the phone. I called a wrestling agent, a booker, and I looked to see when people would be in town, so I didn't have to incur the travel. And I called and I booked our first night. We booked Greg Valentine and the Honky Tonk Man. And after their match, I made a plan to clandestinely meet them in a hotel room down the hall from the hotel they were staying at. They let me know where they were, so I didn't want to. I knew other people were bringing them in and going to have them doing stuff, and I wanted to leech off of their expenses, basically. So yeah, we set up in a room down the hall, and Greg got back from the event with Honk, and I told them what room, and they came down and they sat, and we put on headphones, and we individually covered like 10 or 15 matches with me and them on the headset. And though it was for a different product than what our shoot interviews became, I call it like our garage band tapes.
Yeah.
We ended up releasing all of them in one set, a box set. And you can hear in those interviews kind of what we ended up starting to do on video. So we did that for a few months, but we had to sell them so cheap. It was a couple of bucks, I think, per match. And it became very obvious, as you're paying talent what we're paying them. And wrestling fans finding such an offbeat product like this, there weren't many. It was like a niche of a niche of a niche. I said, listen, we're going to have to go to something more traditional like video.
Yeah.
People know what a shooter interview is. If you tell people, yeah, it's a new kind of shooter interview, but you tell people, yeah, they're downloadable audio commentary alternative tracks for wrestling matches. What?
Yeah.
We couldn't educate the market quickly enough to make money to stay in business. So I said to Anthony, I said, we'll do it differently. My background was production, right? So in entertainment. So I was like, we're gonna light it, we're gonna mic it, it's gonna look good, it's gonna sound good, it's gonna be a real interview. I might even put on a jacket to sit next to the talent and be on camera, not the floating disenfranchised detached voice flying around asking questions. I'm gonna sit there, it's gonna be a talk show. We'll format it. Let's do something called guest booker was actually called And the Year Was, which I'm so glad I changed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, where we get a booker to come on and we give them a year and a federation and book it, one that they were not responsible for. So we had Sullivan come in and book WWF in 1984. If he couldn't have Hogan, could he still have made the company become what it was in the cable TV era? Just thought it was a great concept. You get the writers of Seinfeld and you make them write an episode of Star Trek and you film it to see the creative process. So that was the idea, and that's how Guest Booker came. And then we were like, wow, we're doing this with Guest Booker. We could do another show called You Shoot, where the fans ask questions. We can do a show, and that's how the company was born.
You said so fans knew shoot interviews at the time that you guys were starting this, but was it still looked at by the wrestlers as kind of like a, maybe the more old school wrestlers as like a risque type of, they didn't really want to do it too much?
No, I think when I would initially probably call someone to book them for a show, they probably thought shoot interview, but then I would always have to explain, we're going to watch a match and talk about that match and what was going on, not just in the ring. We're not doing play-by-play for it, but we're going to talk about that time period. And when Anthony and I would choose the matches, we made sure we spread them out over decades. If that person had a long career, different promoters, different promotions. So in the course of all those MP3s, we could cover Georgia, we could cover the Carolinas, we could cover Florida, we could cover WCCW. So when I gave the explanation, as much as they could understand it, they were down with it. I think they dug it when we did it. They loved watching themselves and talking about it. But yeah, the concept initially needed some explanation.
Yeah. So based off that, was there anyone in the industry, because you were clearly picking up steam and building relationship with these wrestlers, your hospitality is well known, what you gave them when they came on set, but was there any backlash from other wrestlers in this industry who hadn't had it explained to them yet?
No.
That's good.
We were famously aligned with talent always. Like
That's huge.
they
Yeah.
usually did our shows multiple times because they enjoyed it legitimately. I know they said they did, and they continue to do it. So I guess there's some truth
Yeah.
to that. We always had that simpatico. We had a couple of difficult situations with talent. It was nothing we did. Either someone was, might have ripped us off or showed up in a condition not worthy of the camera. And I'm not putting them on camera and charging somebody $20 for a DVD when they're chewing on their tongue because they're zooted instead of answering my questions. So I would shut it down and send them home.
And I think that is the right move in that situation. And like I said earlier, well known for producing a quality piece of content that you are. One I want to ask you about in particular is someone we don't really see leave the safety of his home too much these days, Jim Cornette. You had a great relationship with him, great content you made with him. What is it like going into an interview with someone as knowledgeable, though, as Jim Cornette? Because you weren't just doing an interview, you were doing in-depth research and everything, and he has this photographic memory of wrestling. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, I wish I haven't talked to Jim in a while. I would like to first receive his thank you for giving him a resurgence in popularity, which allowed him to springboard into podcasting and have a very successful life there. It got to the point where our shows, he called me one day after working for someone else, and he said, it's like, I'm just asking, is there any way you could put me on some kind of fucking retainer where I could tell people, no, I'm indebted to Kayfabe Commentaries, and I don't have to do these fucking shows because I'm tired of making excuses and I'm tired of doing them.
That's
So
good, by the way. Great impression.
thank you. So yeah, he asked if we could do like some kind of retainer for. I said, well, Jim, that's weird, because now it puts me on the hook to have to bring you in, and I don't want to wear you out. I said, but why don't we develop a show together? I'll hire you to be one of the writers and you can host the show, which was Back to the Territories, which
Right.
has been replicated by, I don't know, pick one production company. But it was where we took a territory, a singular territory, put Corny, who's a historian, um, to cover the history of the Federation. He always had great artifacts that he and Stacy would photograph and send to me that we would drop into the shows, into that series. And he would write the interview, and we would talk to him about, okay, so what talent do you think would be good to cover Georgia? And based on who is available, we would book it. And so doing that show with him, that was the magic for us. We'd hired him and he'd come in and done so much stuff with us, and he loved it because we covered the historical aspect,
Right.
but we still allowed a lot of personality because Jim is a character, right? So it was the best of both worlds for him, and it showcased perfectly the historical sensibilities, but also him being hosting the interview and sitting there with Greg Gagne or Dutch Mantel or Lance Storm, and one of the many people he did for the Back to the Territory series. It was definitely one of the most popular series that we produced, and it was magic. It was more of that right guest, right show.
Mhm.
That was kind of the formula that we had to get down. Sometimes we had right guest, wrong show,
Yeah.
uh, or wrong guest, right show. You want to get the right person on the right program, and then you have the magic. Not everybody can do you shoot. You want people who are lightning rods, people who will uh it, get a lot of fan reaction, because that show was entirely conducted by the fans through emailed questions and video questions. So we wanted people that would give us a ton of fan response to sift through, and they also had to be one to sit there and roll with it if
Right.
there was something insulting, or, and we got a little crazy with the dick bag and the hoe bag and all that stuff. They got to be able to roll with it too. So they had to be a lightning rod, and they had to be of the personality that they could come in and have some fun. So you want to make sure you get the right guest for that show. Whereas guest booker, you need someone who booked an actual federation
Right.
and could book on the fly, because we're going to give them, something to book that they weren't responsible for.
I feel like Dickbag and Hobag were my early days of YouTube. Like those were some of the first wrestling
Probably.
clips that I was watching. Yeah. And they
It's
were
gonna
good.
be on my epitaph. How many books I write about history, how many times I had Bruno Sammartino on my show, Harley
Doesn't
Race
matter.
on my shows. My tombstone will say, "How big is Batista's dick?"
Yes. Well, speaking of memorable moments that happened during your interviews, were you the one that captured the Jim Cornette famous face that is now on t-shirts? Was that your interview?
God, tough. That's tough to say if it was us. There were shoots with Jim before us, so Corny Face might have been before us. I will tell you that we used that face when we would do Back to the Territories, and we would need to go to a map, because
Yeah.
maybe he would talk about the loop that a talent would do in Florida, and the talent is saying, "Yeah, we'd start out in Orlando, and then we go, we do Tallahassee, and then we do Jacksonville," and the map would come up. The Corny Face is what we would have drive
Following the
around
map.
as each city was mentioned.
That is
So though it may not have originated on our show, it certainly made it into Back to the Territory.
nice. No, you definitely used it well. You also got along well with Jim, Jim's nemesis, you could say, Vince Russo. And I'd love to hear what was the difference like of interviewing those two for you being able to be in the middle?
God, that's the funniest. Am I the only person that maintained a good friendship with both of them?
You're in an elite group for sure. I don't think there's
Yeah.
many.
Not only a friendship, but I worked well with both. Like I hired them, and they worked well in our same shows,
Right.
just not with each other. You'd think that it's opposite ends of the spectrum. It was. Well, you asked me what the difference in them. Um, I'll tell you this, shockingly, as I consider this question for the first time, which you should give yourself a nod for that. I'm not often asked anything outside the same 7 questions on any show I do. So that's a good one. There are more similarities than there are differences.
Wow.
They both have great senses of humor about about themselves. They're self-effacing. I could make fun of either of them. I could turn to Jim and say, "Oh, well, that match didn't happen in a barn in Tulsa in 1950. So, Jim, you probably don't even know what I'm talking about right now." And he could laugh and give it back to. And Russo, I could bust his balls too. It's the New York sense of humor, which you probably obviously have too.
Yeah.
So they were similar in that way. They both loved wrestling. I know Jim would say, nobody that fucking books a hand coming out of a woman's twat loves wrestling. God damn. But they both love wrestling. How they handled it was two different things. And that's where then you get to the differences, right? And what one viewed as disrespect on part of the other. But they both loved the sport. You could talk wrestling with them. You could have fun with them. They were both personable, easy to work with, punctual, professional. I loved working with both of them.
Yeah.
Just could never do it in the same room.
No, but just with the whole aura, like the Hatfield and McCoy sense that surrounds them, it's so cool that to hear your take from in between. Amazing. There are more similarities and differences. Wow.
Yeah. They would both hate to hear me say that.
Yes. Well, hopefully they're not watching. Hopefully everyone watches except those two, because we need every view we can get. But I want to know, was there ever something a guest said on either of the kayfabe commentary shows that genuinely did shock you? Because I know the research was so vast that you guys did for these. Was there anything that did surprise you?
Nothing that comes to mind. We were usually pretty well prepared. Oh, Roddy Piper mentioned that he didn't like Pat Patterson, which surprised me. I said, "Oh, you guys worked together so long." And he went into an event when he was a young man that he was very uncomfortable with. The clip is out there, I think, isolated on YouTube somewhere. It's in the trailer for Timeline, the history of WWE 1984 with Roddy Piper. That was shocking.
Yeah.
And an improper moment with Pat when Roddy was a young guy breaking in. And that shocked me. It Roddy's bravery in saying it, I guess, was to be admired, but I know there was blowback to him from Connecticut. And after that, what was that series? Legends House was released, which
Yeah.
was a show on the WWE Network at the time, still available, I think, where they put a bunch of wrestlers in a house to live together for like a month. Pat and Roddy were there in the same house. Now, this was shot before my interview with Roddy, but released after.
Okay.
Which is significant because Pat hadn't seen Roddy talk about this.
Okay.
But as I watched it, and I invite everyone to go back and correct me if I'm wrong. The interaction between the two of them was almost nil. Sitting in a group and everyone's talking and deciding what to do for a project they're given or whatever on the show, I don't know, but where you see Tony Atlas talking to Hacksaw Jim Duggan, or Jimmy Hart comes in and talks to Roddy. Roddy was never alone talking with Pat.
I'm gonna go back and watch that now. I don't know if I've ever actually watched Legends House all the way through, but I'm gonna check that out. Going off of that concept of Legends House, awesome concept that WWE did. I've heard you say that you had other concepts for kayfabe commentators that never saw the light of day. I'm very interested to hear. One of them I heard you say was wrestler polygraph, which I'm not sure if you were serious or not, but I think that would have been very entertaining. Can you take us down a road of maybe concepts that only made it onto the piece of paper?
Sure. Some of it came with much laughter and half joking as much as we were serious. But some things that were very close to going but never did. We had a show called House Show, and it was Kamala comes to John Fan's house for the day. Sit and watch TV together, out at the grill, throw a wrestler into a fan's house, and film what happens all day. So we were actually set to go. I think Sheik was going to be the first one.
That's crazy.
And the issue it still would have been a great. Don't you think that would have been a great show?
Well, Kamala was crazy enough, but Sheik, to even an unsuspecting fan or a fan you haven't explained it much to, I think would have been amazing.
Right. And it's so many ways to go. There's like the crash element of it, like Sheiky sitting there drinking beers, Uncle Vern sitting on the couch
Yes.
next to him. And then there's you get the object of a fan's desire who shows up. And she's walking around while he and his friends are all day just staring, a bunch of different ways you could go when you put a wrestler in the house. The reason I had to nix it was I could not get a guarantee from insurance
Okay.
that if anything ever happened, you can imagine putting a sheik at someone's grill. The visual would be great. Apron kiss the chef.
Yes.
Apron at the grill with the hot dogs. We were ready to do it all. But what happens if Sheik had too much to drink and fell into the grill? I didn't want it. So,
It is over.
yeah. So that was the end of that. But conceptually, something I was in love with. This was a very, very abstract concept. Ox in a box, wherein we
Ox Baker.
Ox Baker in a hotel room with a hidden camera for 8 hours and just released it. Watch Ox. What does he do? What does he watch on TV? Where does he scratch a lot? What does he order from room service? What is the outfit like? Who does he call? What are the conversations? Ox in a box. We might have been driving home from a shoot at about 3 a.m. in rural Pennsylvania and totally punchy and tired.
Yeah.
When that was pitched, I think Ox in a Box. Yeah, it was that kind of stuff. House Party, I think, would have been huge. I don't so much know about Ox in a Box. The polygraph, we wouldn't have done because that would have been terrible for us. That what made our shoot interviews successful was that there was no polygraph for a wrestler, and they were free to just say whatever the hell they want and pass it off as fact. Something we did consider for a minute was I forget the name of the show. If I probably have a file of all the one sheets of the pitches we had, was to have a licensed certified therapist come in and do a session with some. I keep going to Sheik. Sheik's one of those guys that could have done any show except guest book, although that might have been fun too. To kind of climb through their mind a little bit and do a live therapy session. I also thought an episode of You Shoot From Beyond would be good, where we sat with a psychic medium, and it was questions only for dead wrestlers, and they would have to channel the wrestler and answer as the wrestler. Yeah. This will all be on WWE Network next week, by the way. That's how, usually it's just when we release a show, it would show up. Now it'll just be my pitches and just show up.
Oh my God. Ox in a Box, probably my favorite out of that. But the therapy one, I think, could even be useful for a lot of these guys. That's good.
Yeah.
One day. Well, Sean, thank you. You've been so respectful with your time. I really appreciate you coming on. I want to ask you one final question. A superlative. You've had a wild journey in the wrestling world, but what is some advice that you would give young Sean Oliver, who is about to embark on this journey into shoot interviews and beyond?
Start it 10 years before I did. I'd rather be 41 right now talking to you about everything we've done than 51. But I say that, but the technology really wasn't there yet. It wasn't democratized like it had become, where people could pretty easily produce and edit their own programming without owning a TV studio. I don't know that I would have changed anything, honestly. We worked really hard, took it really seriously, grew it as a business, took it seriously as a business, treated the wrestlers well, treated the programming well, which means you're treating the fans well if you have a high standard of what you shoot and release for them. And it was because we were all fans. Yeah. Everyone that worked at the company was a fan. So we did everything from that standpoint. What would a fan want to see? Well, how do I want to watch this as a fan? So we did so much of it right.
Well, that's great. I mean, and it shows right now too. I feel like you're in an awesome point in your shoot interview life journey right now with one of the people you had the best chemistry with. And that's really cool to see. But I'm glad you wouldn't have changed a thing. And like I said, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this, just getting a glimpse into your crazy life.
I would have produced Ox in a Box.
Yes, please. Thank you. That's what everyone young just getting into it should realize. If you have an idea, no matter how crazy it is, do it. Ox in a Box included.
We did Missy Hyde's pajama party, for God's sakes.
I did hear about that. New Jack in the closet or something, just waiting.
Made him run out of the bathroom, and we did an F, marry, kill. It was so funny. He came in the room, and I saw him, and I said, "Put him on the side. They can't see him." And we had them do an F, marry, kill. It was like Honky Tonk Man, New Jack, and someone else. And when they all said they'd killed New Jack, we opened the door. He ran out and dove onto the bed.
Probably the best New Jack dive that's out there. Can I find that somewhere?
Maybe not. God, is it not on our KC Vault channel? Everyone go to Best of the KC Vault on YouTube. And that's where all of our programming, that's our subscription channel now. And we do put out like 4 or 5 free ones. We cycle them through a month so people can check it out. But if you want I don't know, it's like almost at like 1,000 hours of program, or maybe more now. I don't know. I always ask Steve, I forget. All of our shows are available for you for a very low monthly price of $14.99. You can watch them again and again. The rewatchability from a historical standpoint and an entertainment standpoint of our shows is second to none.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interviews.